It begins not with gold or silver, but with a flower, a delicate, transient bloom that grows for only a few weeks each year. In the winter of 1636, merchants in Amsterdam gathered in taverns lit by candles, their voices echoing through the smoky air. They were not discussing spices from the East or ships returning from the Indies. They were trading flowers they would never touch, tulip bulbs buried deep in frozen soil. Outside, the canals were silent under the ice, but inside, prices burned hotter than any forge. A single bulb could cost as much as a house on Amsterdam's most expensive street. A rare strain called the Semper Augustus was said to be worth more than a merchant ship. The richest city in the world was losing its mind over a flower. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it all fell apart. Fortunes vanished overnight. Contracts were torn to shreds. The market that had once promised endless wealth collapsed into silence. How did this happen? How did the world's first modern economy, rational, disciplined, and global, fall victim to hysteria over a plant? To understand the tulip mania, we must first understand the world that birthed it. The Dutch Republic of the 17th century was no ordinary country. It was a miracle of commerce and innovation. In just a few decades, this small collection of provinces had become the richest and most advanced society on Earth. Amsterdam was the financial capital of the world, the home of the first stock exchange, the first joint stock companies, and the first modern futures markets. Ships of the Dutch East India Company returned from Asia laden with silk, tea, and spices, filling the city's warehouses with wealth beyond imagination. In this golden age, capitalism itself was being invented, and so were its dangers. The same system that allowed risk and reward to be shared also allowed speculation to take root. Tulips first arrived in Europe a few decades earlier, imported from the Ottoman Empire. They were unlike anything Europeans had seen. Bright, intricate, almost unnatural in their perfection. In the Netherlands, they found the ideal climate and an ideal audience. The Dutch had wealth, taste, and a new obsession with status symbols. A rare tulip was not just a flower, it was a statement, a mark of sophistication and success. But beauty alone wasn't enough to spark an economic fever. The real fuel came from finance. By the 1630s, a sophisticated trading network had emerged. Tulips were not sold as flowers, but as futures, promises to deliver bulbs at a later date. Contracts were exchanged, resold, and speculated upon, often many times before a bulb ever bloomed. This system, what we would now call derivatives, allowed anyone with a few guilders to gamble on the market. Prices began to rise as demand for rare varieties surged. The more people paid, the more others wanted to join in. A feedback loop of greed began to spin. A bulb bought for a few florins one month could fetch hundreds the next. Soon, even ordinary citizens were caught up in the frenzy. Bakers, blacksmiths, and sailors began trading tulips in taverns and public halls, dreaming of riches. The most coveted bulbs were those infected by a mosaic virus that caused unique color patterns, flames, stripes, and feathers. These broken tulips were unpredictable and rare, each one unique. Their fragility only made them more desirable. A single specimen could sell for 10 times a craftsman's annual wage. The market expanded beyond logic. Houses were sold to buy bulbs. Contracts were signed against future harvests. In the frozen months when no tulip could be dug from the earth, the trade became entirely virtual. Numbers on paper, promises on parchment, dreams on credit. The first speculative bubble in history was forming. As winter deepened in 1636, tulip trading reached its peak. Auctions were held in taverns where bidders shouted and drank, deals sealed with handshakes and laughter. The most prestigious bulbs, like the Viceroy and the Semper Augustus, were traded for prices that defied reason. A historian later recorded a single Semper Augustus bulb being valued at 12 acres of land. For a few months, it seemed as if the Dutch had found a way to turn beauty into infinite wealth. But behind the euphoria, cracks were forming. By early 1637, confidence began to waver. A few buyers failed to show up to complete their deals. Rumors spread that prices might not rise forever. At an auction in Haarlem in February 1637, the first warning came. No one bid. The room fell silent. Panic spread through the city. Traders tried to sell their contracts, but there were no buyers. Prices began to plummet. Within days, the entire market collapsed. The same crowds that had once laughed and toasted their fortunes now sat in stunned disbelief. The value of bulbs fell by more than 90%. A contract worth thousands of florins became worthless overnight. The economic consequences rippled outward. People who had pledged homes or businesses as collateral were ruined. Tavern traders defaulted on debts they could never repay. Lawsuits flooded local courts as buyers and sellers argued over whether tulip contracts were legally binding. Some municipalities tried to intervene, proposing that buyers pay a small portion of their contract's value to settle disputes. But it was too late. The damage had been done, not just financially, but psychologically. The Dutch Republic, once the model of rational enterprise, had exposed its vulnerability to collective madness. What makes the tulip bubble so fascinating is not just that it happened, it's that it happened in the most advanced economy of its time. The Dutch had pioneered everything modern markets rely on: liquidity, contracts, credit, and transparency. They had built the world's first financial system, and yet they were not immune to emotion. Tulip mania was not about flowers, it was about belief. Each buyer convinced the next that the price would always rise. It was, in essence, the world's first economic meme, an idea that spread faster than reason, replicating through excitement, envy, and hope. In the aftermath, the Dutch economy did not collapse entirely, though individuals were devastated. The tulip trade was a small part of the broader economy, and Amsterdam's merchants quickly returned to real commodities like spices, sugar, and trade goods. But the story of the bubble endured, not because of the scale of loss, but because of its symbolism. It was the first time a society realized that markets could go mad, that the same system that created wealth could destroy it through psychology alone. The moral lessons echoed for centuries. Economists and historians debated how irrational the mania truly was. Some modern scholars argue it was exaggerated by later writers like Charles Mackay, who popularized the tale in his 1841 book, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Others see it as the birth of modern speculation, a template for every boom and bust that followed, from South Sea stocks to cryptocurrencies. Whatever the details, the pattern is unmistakable. Human beings fall in love with ideas of wealth faster than they can measure their worth. 3 lessons endure from the tulip bubble. First, markets are not ruled by logic. They are ruled by emotion. The most advanced systems still depend on trust, fear, and desire. Second, value is a story we agree to believe. When belief breaks, so does value. And third, every generation must rediscover the same truth, that the line between investment and illusion is as thin as a petal. The Dutch tulip bubble may have ended nearly 400 years ago, but its spirit has never left us. It lives in every chart that rises too fast, in every can't-miss trend, in every promise that this time is different. Because in the end, tulip mania wasn't just about flowers, it was about us. The need to believe that beauty, scarcity, or innovation can escape gravity. The 17th century Dutch found their mirror in a flower. We find ours in screens filled with numbers and hopes. The more things change, the more the roots remain the same. If this story made you look at markets and human behavior differently, subscribe to Economic Collapse. Because every boom begins as a dream, and every dream carries the seed of its own end.